We often speak um, in the Dharma world about, we use the phrase conditioning uh, and freeing ourselves from conditioned patterns. And it's just a way of speaking that, of course, everything, we're all wired, our bodies, our minds, our psychology, due to, it could be a lot of things. Just we're born in a certain way and we've had certain life experiences. And many of these, then we call them habitual patterns. You think of this habit of mind. Something happens and maybe certain neural pathways light up in the brain in a response. And sometimes we can be aware of these things, but oftentimes we're not. And this is a big part of the disentangling that you could think of that Dharma is about, is liberating us from these patterns. But it gets a little tricky, and there's both a personal and an impersonal aspect to the conditioning. It's personal, of course, because your conditioned patterns, it's happening to you. Yes, so it's personal in that sense. But the impersonal nature is, um, we sometimes we know, but a lot we don't even know how how we're wired up, our personalities, our psychology, the way our bodies, how it got to be conditioned in that way. Sometimes it's not so clear. Um, but I don't think you woke up one morning and decided, um, I think I'm going to habituate my mind to have more reactivity, more fear, more anger, right? More confusion. Yeah, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. And what can I do to program those patterns in me? More hatred, more greed, all the patterns that create suffering for ourselves and others. Right. It didn't happen like that, right? Who knows? Like I say, sometimes we do know we've had certain traumas in life. So need to be very sensitive and respectful for all of that, for sure. Or just experiences that have stuck with us. But oftentimes, so much we don't even know. It's in a sense the impersonal aspect. In a way, you could say it happened to you. You're at the effect of it. And again, it's your mind. Yes. So that's the personal. But we have to hold both perspectives in order to get the whole picture, right? If we think if none of it's personal, then we can get away from what we'd say personal responsibility. So then we're out of balance. But we're also out of balance if we take ownership and responsibility for everything. I think it was Wes Nisker, may have been him, who said, he was trying to be humorous, but I actually thought there was a lot of truth to it. He said, "You are not your fault." And but I see what he's pointing to, and it's pointing to the way we can hold ourselves with a more accurate view of ourselves, right? Because I think it's easy to fall into like the self-judging and criticism and not being kind to ourselves, because look, we're all experts on the lived experience of our lives, right? But we're not experts on what we make of it, the story we tell ourselves about it, or how we judge it to be. Matter of fact, I would go so far as to say that each of us, I'll put myself in here too, that you are the least qualified to judge yourself. And what I mean by that is, yes, again, you are obviously the expert on the lived experience from within of your life, but you're not objective about it, right? And so when we're judging, or now we want to have discernment, and I mentioned the other day that I make a distinction. I use the word judging and discernment just judging for me is when I'm speaking about what I call unwholesome, unhelpful, negative, suffering generating judging, versus a discernment, which has a judging quality in it, but that's more, to me, a clarity, because we want to look and see and know and understand things, right? So that part we need. And what happens, I think, oftentimes for all of us, I've experienced it many, many times, right? That where um, I think I'm seeing it clearly, and yet it's just my judging mind and my negativity, and whether it's my, we've all had our main issues. Yesterday, I think I referred to them as our top 10 tunes. The main, we share a lot in common, but we've all got our own individual combination of wholesome and unwholesome, and our own combination of conditioned patterns. And I won't go into a lot of detail, but among my top 10 tunes when I was young, I suffered a lot and struggled a lot with issues around self-esteem. And of course, that that can take many forms, but really I felt in an inner despair, and I could say a lot more about it. And it was, I mean, really kind of a dominant theme in my life through I think my teenage, and through a lot of into my early 20s and mid 20s. And I suffered a lot, and I kind of despaired of ever being able to um, free myself or rid myself of these. And so I think uh, um, as I look back, we all find our own way through probably a fair amount of psychotherapy. Didn't hurt me, that's for sure. But also, I credit a lot to Dharma practice and meditation. That it wasn't until many years later, and I looked back and I realized, wow, that's all of those forces. They're just not very operative anymore. And I want to be careful. I'm not making any grand claims. My mind seems to be quite capable of finding many ways of suffering. So I'm not making any claims here, but certainly in those particular areas, which have been very, very powerful and just a profound part of my identity, right? That's a clinging there, right? An identity in a way, a negative way, kind of had disentangled and kind of evaporated away a lot. And so I don't know if you can get to a point in one's life where you can be so free in whatever the particular area is, as if you never had the wound in the first place. I don't know about that, but but not very operative much really anymore. And that's amazing to me. And I think it shows the power of course, you start to see, when we see ourselves on subtler and subtler levels, it becomes clear how much work there is to do if we want to take the liberation of our hearts and minds really as far as we can take it. It's just a lifetime, if you believe traditional Buddhist teachings, lifetimes of work. But it gets subtler and subtler. And maybe, I don't even know if there's an end. Maybe I'm not supposed to say that, because of course in Theravada Buddhism, there is no end. It's called liberation or enlightenment or becoming an arahant. So, great. But I don't know from direct experience if that's true, but I do know that it just gets subtler and subtler, but we become attuned ever more subtly. And we want to keep working, because you don't get to a point, I don't think, where we just say, okay, this is pretty good. And we do want to get to a point where we're at peace with ourselves. And but when ill will comes up in my heart and mind, I still want to learn to let go of it. So I don't think we stop on the path, but I think we can shift we come to a place where maybe we've really viewed ourselves as seekers. And I used to have that kind of feeling. It's like there's some place I really like. I don't know where I'm trying to get, but it ain't this. it's somewhere else. And so you're trying to move, really, I think for myself, it was kind of moving away from myself into something different, better. I can't remember exactly. And it can shift for a place where we don't feel like we no longer feel the need that we have to get anywhere, and it shifts from having to get somewhere to still being on a path, but we're really resting in more the present. So we go to a place of knowing and being, not egotistical, like I know everything, but so maybe knowing and being is not the best phrase, but a wakeful presence that carries through. And, it's the cliche that all we have is the present moment. But as we all know, right, many of you know very strongly that becomes more and more palpable and alive for us. And we're just here. But by tending well to here, um, that's what keeps moving us forward in a good way. So that's kind of a way that I kind of have an overview of looking at the whole thing. Um, and it's funny because, the Buddha, right, is we often think some people think Buddhism, it's kind of the all suffering all the time channel, right? That's like, God, what's with these Buddhists? All they talk about is suffering. Life is suffering. And of course, people who don't know think that the Buddha said life is suffering. That's not true. Uh, we were talking about it the other day. You go back to the Four Noble Truths, and the Buddha says life is dukkha, meaning it's got an unreliable aspect to it. And when we cling, because things are unreliable and subject to change, if we're clinging and then the situation changes, yes, we suffer. But if we're not clinging, remember, it's a path leading to an end of suffering. So the Buddha didn't actually say life is suffering, but that's what people can commonly think. And the funny thing is, we actually don't need the Buddha to tell us about suffering. We're all experts, every one of us. We know all about it, right? We are all experts on suffering. What we're not experts on is what to do about it. That's because we keep trying the same thing, right? And in that quote that foolishness or stupidity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. But we're human beings. We don't know what else to do. So a big part of it is coming up with, this is how I view the Dharma then, is what are skillful things to help us. And I think that's really what I want to spend the rest of the time on here, a few tips, things that maybe we all know, but this is really what we, I think in any Dharma talk, you're not going to hear things. Why do we keep going back to Dharma talks over and over? But you have to see for yourself. But oftentimes we need reminders, right? It's just like meditating, right? You connect with your breath, and and you're all present, and your heart's open, and you hear somebody gives a Dharma talk, and you say, yeah, I'm going to live in a way that lets go, and my heart's going to be open in love and non-reactivity. And then you have a sincere intention, and then you try to live it, and you realize that you can't do it. That's a great realization. I mean, you can do it in a given moment, but all it takes is the right causes and conditions to come back together, and you're just caught again, right? Cause of the conditioned patterns. And that's why we need to do practices to help train the mind to both do this. I keep using the phrase disentangling, or sort of healing up, evaporating away some of these unwholesome conditioned patterns, but also bringing the wakefulness and the stability to be with them and know when they're happening, so that we're less and less caught in them, right? And we have to really understand these conditioned patterns and hold them with a little more wisdom. So I said before, we didn't wake up and decide we're going to program in, how bad can I make my mind? Let me go off and do that. Nobody has that intention, right? But we have we're all a mix of wholesome and unwholesome. No forces, no question about it, every one of us. And I would think that I'd go so far as to say many, if not all of our actions and motivations are probably a mix of wholesome and unwholesome motivations. Um, you know, that's just what it is in here. Well, when you have a conditioned pattern, um, first of all, to hold it with that kind of impersonal and to hold it with a little, there's a time for dispassion. And there's also a time so dispassion is a tricky word. It can mean to be disconnected, right? But what does it mean to be, or, we'll use the word disenchantment too. These are different words in service of kind of disentangling from things. Well, what does it mean to be disenchanted? Well, some people, it can have the connotation to mean kind of let down or disappointed, but it doesn't actually mean that. That's kind of common usage. But what is it to be what does it mean to be enchanted? Think back to the old fairy tales. The, you know, a spell gets cast on the princess or whatever, and they're in some altered reality. They're in the spell. They've disconnected from reality. And then being a good fairy tale in the end, whatever, she gets kissed by the prince or whatever the story is, and the spell is broken. She's no longer enchanted. She's just back to reality. So when in the Dharma we use the word disenchanted, I don't think we should think of it as uh, uh, let down. We mean caught up in the intoxication or the spell of things, right? It doesn't mean we don't feel everything and experience everything. We don't want to disconnect, right? We're trying to be maybe dispassionate, but not disconnected. In fact, these are practices that are meant to be profoundly connecting. What happens when you sit to meditate? Maybe you could do it eyes open or closed. I think in our tradition, most people sit with eyes closed, and you're bringing your attention inward. You may not have thought of it this way, but you're in fact doing practices that not only train the mind to be more clear and settled and your heart to be more open, but you're training to be ever more subtly and profoundly connected with yourself, right? It's a path of self-discovery. We're looking to see what's the nature of our own being so we're not fooled, right? So a lot of this is seeing ourselves getting back to wise discernment, because when we're fooled, we fall into judging and we're in a battle with ourselves. When we see ourselves clearly, we just say, oh, there's conditioned patterns here. I can hold it, yeah, okay. We don't have to beat ourselves up. So being disenchanted is just breaking the enchantment. Dispassion, what is it to be caught in the passions? Well, I don't know, if you've ever had the experience of being in love. Not everyone has had that experience. I've had the unfortunate experience to fall in love, and it was not fun. It's not great. It's a very unsettled place to be. It's like, is depending on he or she, whomever, is that person are they going to call me back, or do they like me? Or, it can be very, it's not a balanced place, right? And so we can be, being in the passions can actually color our perception. And then, you get whatever in a relationship maybe, and after a few months, the inevitable settling down happens. And you're still, if you're fortunate in life, not everybody experiences this, maybe you still have a deeper love maybe, or a connection, but the fireworks part settles down and you're no longer caught in the passions. What is it? You see more clearly, maybe, maybe all the things you used to thought were cute are now annoyances or something. I don't know, but I'm saying, but that may not be a more accurate perception either. So maybe that's not a good example, but we settle down more. So being just sometimes some dispassion and disenchantment has helped us to actually be more authentically connected then, because if we're in a battle with things, that's not a real connection, right? And so we're able to be quiet and still and to let be, then we can get interested in what our minds and hearts, what's going on here, and have some real investigation. in this dispassionate way, right? And then what is it we see when we start looking? This is to what's going on. Well, what's true about our conditioned patterns? First of all, we can stop beating ourselves up because your conditioned patterns, whatever it is, it only knows how to do its thing, right? If you go onto your computer and you've got your screen open, you've got all these icons, and if you click on the icon for a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, I'm old school. I know everybody's on these Google Docs now, but some of you may not know, but do they still have Microsoft Excel? So you click on the icon for a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. Guess what? You're not going to get Microsoft Word processor open up. It only knows how to do one thing. It runs a little program. And so the spreadsheet comes up, right? It does it every time. And that's all it knows to do, right? When the right causes and conditions come together that trigger the conditioned pattern, lights up the neural pathways inside of you of fear, reactivity, self-loathing, worry, anxiety, whatever it is. Yeah, it's painful. I'm not denying the reality of the experience, but we have to also see that's what the pattern is. That's what it knows how to do. Your anxiety only knows how to make you feel anxious. It doesn't make you feel happy. And so if that pattern's in there, again, we need some self-compassion because none of us decided, oh, let me see how much anxiety I can program in my mind. Yeah, that's a good idea. I think I'll sign up for that. No, of course not. So you got what you got. Welcome to the club, my friend. This is the human condition, right? So our choices are then on how we can work with these things to disentangle. And if we have, so a few things about that. First, number one thing that we've been talking about all retreat, if we have any chance of freeing ourselves from these patterns, it certainly rests upon a fundamental foundation of mindfulness, right? When we use this word mindfulness, it's got many connotations, but so there's the mental state of mindfulness and the practice of mindfulness. We often talk about the practice of mindfulness of consciously bringing your attention on something like mindfulness of breathing. You're putting your awareness and attention on breathing. That's one way to talk about the practice of mindfulness. It's talked about in many ways. The experience, the state of being mindful, I'll just give you my own definition. There's lots of different ones out there. Mine is not being lost on automatic pilot. And so people, you'll often hear people say, oh, that person, he lost his mindfulness. He kind of went unconscious. Well, he didn't go unconscious. He's still conscious. We know what is meant, but the person's still conscious, but they're just lost in things, caught up in things, right? As an example, you can be angry and just be reacting out of it. And that's really different when you kind of wake up in yourself and just can say, oh, I'm angry. This reminds me of a time when I used to work, I was an engineer in Silicon Valley for the semiconductor companies for many years. And I remember being at one of these corporations working, and somebody came to me who was really mad. I don't even remember what it was about, but he thought I had said or done something. It turned out I didn't. It was a mistake. Whatever it was somebody else. I didn't know anything about it, but he thought it was me. And he verbally was laying into me. It was intense. I don't remember any of the details. I just remember the intensity. And I'm not claiming that I'm immune from ever being reactive. And probably if I had gotten reactive, no one would blame me, right? I could say, hey, you're being a jerk and why are you attacking me? And I could get reactive also, right? And that you could understand that that could happen. But thankfully, at least in that situation, mindfulness just on its own came, I'd been a meditator for many, many years by then, and I had a decent amount of mindfulness, and it came to the rescue. And I just responded, and something like, I don't remember the details, but I just remember something like, wow, like, you're really angry. Here, come on, let's go in a conference room, sit down, tell me what's going on. And whatever happened, and I do kind of remember you going, oh, sorry, I'm right. It's okay. It's okay. These things happen, right? And so that's a real difference between reacting at him. This is not my own anger, it's someone else's, or just knowing, and it didn't I felt it, I'm sure, but it didn't, I was able to have some inner stability and know what's happening. So that's a real difference, but because when you're lost on automatic pilot, you don't even know, right? You don't even know. I mean, think about when we do something simple, just like what we consider like foundational meditation instructions. And on this retreat, we've been talking a lot about mindfulness of breathing. So on the very first morning, the instructions were to just, bring your attention to your breathing, pay attention to your breath. And if you remember back, if we were live in a retreat together, I would ask this question I'm about to ask, and someone could answer. I'll ask, well, what's the instruction when you forget and you get lost and forget the breath? You're lost in thinking, planning. And people will say, oh, the instruction is to come back. That's actually not true. This was a trick question. When you're lost in thought and gone, there is no instruction. You don't even know you're gone. The instruction only kicks in when you're already back and you wake up and you kind of realize, oh, where have I been? What, I've forgotten about the breath. You're already back, and then you start up again. You can't do anything about the times when you're lost because you don't even know, and you can't stop it from happening. Right? So it's actually kind of liberating when you think about it, because yes, during those times, we're at the mercy or the effect of our habitual conditioned patterns. Hopefully, nothing too serious. No, there's not too much breakage that comes during those times, because you kind of don't have much choice then. But this is what we're working on, and that gets better. So the habitual patterns keep getting purified, if you will, more, so that even when you're lost on automatic pattern, your habitual response can be better over time, because that's part of the purification of mind that happens in these practices. But also with training, where our mindfulness naturally in presence, wakeful presence, carries through more and more, and we're lost less and less of the time. And when we are lost, less deeply and for not as long. So this is the good news, the practice that we're all doing, right? So we just do the best we can. And then so it really comes down as a simple thing. When we're gone, just be gone. And when you're back, you're just back. We don't need to struggle about all this stuff. And especially I can't tell you how many times I've heard people, I've probably had this happen to me too, where worrying about how terrible their meditation practice and how weak their Dharma practice is. And then I'll ask people, I'll say, well, what do you do during all the times when you're, just like I'm saying, when you're kind of lost your mindfulness and you go, well, I can't do anything about that. I don't even know I'm gone. Right. When you're back, and you know what's happening, and now you have some choice. If you find yourself in reactivity, you're a Dharma practitioner, do you work the best you can to try to let go? And well, yeah. When you're back and you notice ill will and your heart's closed off, do you try to keep an open heart? Well, yeah. That's full blast practice. You cannot do more than that, than be back. And when you know what's happening, when you're all Dharma practitioners, you're all going to try to use your time the best you can. You don't need to, you can stay relaxed. Some people like the practices of mindfulness in daily life, where you try to, they'll say, okay, I'm going to try to stay mindful. So when I'm brushing my teeth, I'm putting my mindful attention on brushing my teeth. And when I don't know, I pick up my phone, I feel my hand on the phone, and, and all these things. Uh, and so that's a respected path of practice. And I'm very respectful of people who do that. I'll just share with me, for me, that's just a lot of work. Don't I get to just relax a little bit here? Just work it every second. So my path has been I do try to be mindful in daily life, but what I've found is mindfulness in daily life can be a practice. And again, I'm trying to be a little humorous, but I actually do find it's a lot of work. But but it can also, mindfulness in daily life can be a fruit of practice. And what I have found is that it's different for everyone, but for me, it's really come out of the formal sitting practice. And as that's deepened, it's the wakeful mindfulness is naturally carried so in daily life, rather than as a practice, it's more a state that carries, I'm not saying everything's perfect, but more and more that way. So we'll each find our own way to work with it. But then at the end of the day, you get what you get moment by moment. And again, if you think your practice is weak or you're judging yourself, you just don't have it's a mistaken view. When you're back in a relaxed way, you'll know because you're back, you're mindful. You'll know if you have a unkind heart. And then you'll use the best tools you have. We don't always find the key, that's true. But just the fact you have an intention to soften your heart. Or if you fall into reactivity, you may not find the key to unlock that, but you'll do your best you can to let go. So actually, people who are Dharma practitioners are often way more, their practice is way more substantive than they may, and profound and deep than people will often give them credit for. And it's a mistaken view we can fall into. And it can gladden our hearts and minds to know we're going to do practices to help strengthen the times when we are present. And then we're going to not worry when we're lost, but when we're back, we know we're going to use it, let our sincere intention guide us. And then we stop falling into identifying with everything that's wrong with us. And by the way, and we can start to connect with our good intentions and everything that's good and right. And you don't have to worry. Everything that's wrong with you, that's a bad way to say it, it'll let you know. Your suffering is going to find you. You stay focused on connecting with your goodness. Don't worry. All your sufferings, isn't it true? It's going to, all the unwholesome patterns of your mind, they'll come. You'll have lots of opportunities to work with them, right? And that's how I hope we can hold them, as opportunities. Because if you want to free your mind from habitual conditioned patterns, if there's some pattern in there or potential to fall into ill will, wouldn't you rather know it than not? How do we come to understand our suffering and its cause and its ending? How do you understand it? You have to have some experience. So we have to use the times when suffering comes around to teach us. And that's a way to hold it, right, as a teacher. And then we can, we don't have to throw a party and be happy that we have that part in there. It doesn't feel great, but we can just know we've got these patterns. Oh, something gave an opportunity. What some of you, if you were in the, when we did the Brahma Vihara guided session just before the talk, and I had said something about, radiating love in sort of an abstract for all beings. And I said, sometimes it's hard when you get around actual beings. And I was trying to be a little humorous, but actually I can remember coming off I'm just picturing one retreat in particular, and I really got into this metta place, and it was beautiful. And I was radiating metta for all beings, and I was just drenching in this love. And then as soon as I left retreat, I can't remember, maybe, I don't know if it was the very first person I came into, but somebody maybe on the road cut me off. And all my, I think even in my mind, it was just kind of like, I actually remember a time I was driving home. God, this shows you my mind, how defiled and corrupted it could be. And I think had this memory of coming off that retreat and chanting, there's a sutta called the Metta Sutta, the sutta, the discourse on metta, loving kindness. And it goes through this list of, may all beings everywhere, be happy and free. And then you're radiating in all these directions. And I'm chanting in my mind, all being, and then I turned to the person who cut me off in the car as he just being kind of aggressive. And what happened in my mind, I'm going to say out loud, was, may all beings jerk. And then I came right back, didn't miss a beat, to whether they're near or far, may all beings. And then about 10 seconds later, I woke up. I said, wait a minute, what just happened? Now that guy did me a favor. He unmasked a conditioned habitual, I use this term neural pathway. I don't know if he lit it up that I wouldn't see. Because how is it that you see your conditioning? Right? Where is it? You can't get it unless it's when it becomes actualized or activated. Then we have access to it. So again, we don't go looking to try and stir it up. You could do that, and I think there probably are some respected styles of practice that may do that. That's fine, but we just live and be open and receptive. And then what's needed will come. And then we want to hold it with this wisdom instead of falling into this judgment where we take it personally in the way that I've been saying is not the whole picture, and we get out of balance. So that's one way, I think, to hold these things as we're working to liberate our minds. But I want to offer a few more things. I also think it's very, very important to recognize that some experiences, they're just too much for us. And one of the things that can happen when we're doing Dharma practice, meditation, or just in life, we think this thing is that we're supposed to be present with something. That's the instruction, right? You're supposed to be with it. I would like it, I've heard people speak like that. I would just like to offer a different perspective, which is there's not a supposed to. There's no supposed to anything. Yes, we want to learn how to be present with things, for sure. And a big problem is most of us could really use to be able to strengthen our ability to be present with something. But we have to also recognize when things really are too much for us and how to care for ourselves to back off. That will really help us, because creating the safety and protection of ourselves will serve us to then be more present when it's not too much for us. Because we know we can now sometimes our experience, I have to say, doesn't give us the option. And then you do the best you can, right? If you're dealing with some kind of chronic pain, some chronic life situation, mental situations, whatever it is, I really have to be very respectful that that's a whole different game there, right? So sometimes we don't have a choice, and then you do. And if there's something that really is too much for us and you can't get away from it, that's a lot of suffering. And it may be that we have to work with our suffering then. So we need to honor that if that's true. But there's a lot of times when maybe we do have a choice. And in those areas, knowing when something is within the range when we can work, and really respect when it's out of that, can create a safety that then all the other things I've been talking about this can allow us then to come back, be more present, work with things, let it teach us. We tend not to get buffeted or caught in it so much because it's within the realm that we can work, right? And all the things I've been talking about. But when it's too much, it's hard to do that. And, I have this I've used this image. Some of you have heard this. I use it a lot, but I think it really works. If you imagine there's a circle and that you are sitting at the center of the circle, and within the circle is, however big or narrow it is, depending on this experience, is within the circle are all the experiences and the level of intensity for each one for which you're able to be with it in a way that's really be present. But if the quality or intensity is such that it gets so much strong or big that it's outside our circle, again, it's not a supposed to. We have to recognize that this is kind of beyond. And what happens is, there's a gray zone there around the edge of right on the edge of the circle, and sometimes it's not clear. So sometimes we'll stay with something we think we should, or we're going to try. And really it would have served, like if you're trying to sit, whatever, and you have knee pain, there are times to stay with it, right? But there are also times where out of compassion, it would serve us better to get some relief and stretch out your knee, right? And it's not always clear which is the right way. And so you have to choose. But sometimes I know people, one guy came to me, he was on some retreat and some Dharma meditation, he needed to move. He ended up damaging the cartilage in his knee because one of these Dharma teachers, bonehead Dharma teachers, said, I won't give the name, said, you don't need to move. You just stay with it. That wasn't very good advice. It was wrong. Should have stretched his knee out. He didn't know, so he sat with it, right? What good did that do him? On the other hand, there are times when we end up shifting or adjusting or getting away from something, and really we could have stayed with it. Okay, it happens. We missed an opportunity to work with our pain and let go our suffering around it. It's okay. More opportunities will come, don't worry. So you make your best choice on how to work with these things, but just holding the idea. I remember once my daughter, when she was a teenager, I think she was about 17, she said a couple of 10-day retreats with me. And there's one retreat and I ended up injuring my neck. For about 2 or 3 months, it's been okay. It wasn't like a permanent thing, but from a pinched nerve, I got this radiating nerve pain. It's like a sciatica thing you can get also. I've had that too. And if you've ever had this kind of sciatica thing, there's something about the quality, not just the intensity, but the quality of it that's just, there's no way to be with it. It's just, forget it. And maybe you found a way, and then please email me so I can get some tips from you, but I wasn't finding the way. And I was in a lot of discomfort. And I remember asking myself, well, there are people in chronic pain where things don't get better. What it would be like if the doctors checked it and x-rayed it and everything. He said, don't worry, this in the disc and something's swollen. That's why, and the swelling goes down, it'll stop pressing on the nerve. And it did, but it took a few months. But I thought in my mind, what would happen if this is how it is for the rest of my life? How would I be with that? I was already a Dharma teacher then. So it's like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be with everything. And the answer in my mind was, heck no. If that happens, me and God are going to meet out here in the patio and have it out. Because this is just a no, non-negotiable. That was the feeling of it, right? It was that. And so if it wasn't something that was going to go away, then I would have to learn and find the way. And there are people I know who have done that, and wasn't easy. I met a woman once who, I think it was in Tucson, Arizona. I was teaching a retreat, and she was in a wheelchair. And she had, I guess it was rheumatoid arthritis, one of the really bad kinds, and her hands, fingers were all twisted up, and she was there in the chair, and she was glowing, beaming. And I was talking to her, and she's talking about her struggle for, I think it had been 10 years with this pain. And I asked, well, you in pain now? She goes, yeah, I'm always in pain. And, I have some meds that kind of helps. And I talked to her about it, and really, she was asking me my advice, but actually it was like being in the presence of the guru with her. And it's like, I said to her, you should be the one up here to give the talk about this because you have been, and she was telling me how really, of course, she never would have chosen it, but it forced a level of non-clinging because there was no way around. There was only through. And so it was a hard teacher and a fierce fire, but she had kind of popped, maybe she's an unusual story, but it popped through the other side. And the level of non-clinging had gotten so deep and strong that she came into this amazing place of the freedom of her mind. And I'm telling you, I just felt it was palpable being in her presence. So yes, it can be like that. But if we have a choice, hopefully we don't have to get in that kind of fire, but we do want to learn to work with our suffering. We don't have to lift Olympic level weights, but maybe we start with little weights if we have a choice and build up, and our ability to expand our circle to include more and more of the experience of our lives can grow. And maybe what it is to be a Buddha is there's no edge anymore, perhaps, right? But I do know that the circle can keep expanding, and that's a lot of life. Of what life is that this balance and clarity and liberation, the stream of non-clinging, many of you know this yourself, becomes more and more alive and carries through for all the ups and downs of our lives more and more, right? And so it's just, I've just said a few basic things really about we need to cultivate our mindfulness. We need to cultivate what I think is a right view. And the term right view from the Eightfold Path comprises a lot, but one of them is holding ourselves with right view, right? About the balance between holding it personally, but impersonally. All right. So we don't fall into like judging and thinking of everything that's wrong and whatever with us. And we hold it with more of a balanced perspective and just can say, yeah, I got that. I do tend to do that. Yeah. That's one of mine. Here, I'll tell you one of mine. Maybe you tell me one of yours. Oh yeah, you got that one. I got that one too, or whatever. And we just know that we're human beings with these conditioned patterns. And then when we can relax around it, again, I'm just summing up the talk. We don't, I don't think it makes us lazy. I find for myself and for others that I've spoken with, it actually creates a relaxation and a safety. So we're able and willing to show up even more for whatever life and our own being dishes up for us. And then we hold it in a whole different perspective, and we don't have to like go, it's just like, oh, it's like this, right? And then we can say, when my heart is and my mind are free and I'm in this loving place, it feels like this. Oh, when I'm in worry or anxiety or fear or anger, that feels like this. And not to over idealize it, because sometimes we are caught in it, of course, but when we can hold it with more perspective, and then we may investigate a little bit, or we may just bring our mindfulness to it, or we may bring antidotes to it, like loving kindness, or so, many, many different tools in the toolkit we may learn to bring, right? And then this last piece I'm talking about of knowing that sometimes things can be too much. So we know we can back off if we need to, right? And what's kind of I guess supposed to be kind of a joke, stereotype, cliche. When is it time to pull out the ice cream and put on an old movie and turn your brain off? Or whatever version of that, right? If life gives you, if you're fortunate enough to have choices sometimes, then that can take the pressure valve off, is the idea. And so I'm very big on erring on the side of caring for ourselves, making your body comfortable. Because as I said earlier, I guess I was trying, it's a little going for a laugh, but it's true. I said, don't worry, your suffering will find you, because it does. So you're not going to lose any opportunities if you err on the side of self-kindness, caring for yourself, as long as you're willing to show up when the suffering comes, you'll get everything you need, and you don't fall into laziness or complacency, I find. So that was a few things. And I have just one more thing that I'll just offer kind of as closing. And it's kind of in the spirit of when I was talking earlier about how people can judge their Dharma practice and their meditation practice. By the way, I use the word Dharma practice and meditation practice. I make a distinction there. I think that the formal trainings of our mind and our heart, that's the formal meditation, is a huge, big deal. But I find when I use the word Dharma practice, it comprises that, but also extends out to just walking around in our daily lives and coming into contact with just whatever life is. And that's an opportunity, again, like to light up those neural pathways. And that can be sometimes the most powerful learning edge. So for me, Dharma practices includes all of that anyway. And I was talking about how people can fall into judging themselves, oh, my meditation's weak or whatever. And I was saying, well, when you're actually present, how are you using the time then? Not judging how much of the time it is or how good, but doing the best you can when you know what's happening. And that's really all any of us can do. That's powerful practice. It's not like watered down or in something like that. That's, to me, is really powerful practice. So I want to just say a little bit about just gladdening our hearts and minds kind of as an ending piece here in the last few minutes. One of the things that can happen is we can judge ourselves comparing to other people. But remember, you're judging their outside against your inside. You know what I'm saying? And so we have to I'm just going to mention that so we don't fall into that trap. That could be a whole talk, right, on that. But you get what I'm saying, right? We don't know unless you're claiming psychic powers. There's whatever's going on within them, but you just see the outer look. But boy, you've got all of the inner stuff. So that's one thing that we just don't want to fall into that can help us not fall into like the judging mind. But the second thing I want to offer to end is in the Pali text, there is a lot of water imagery and used in many, many different ways. Even in the descriptions of the jhanas, these samadhi states called jhana, they have what I call jhana similes, which are more poetic and beautiful kind of additional explanations around the definition. And they have a lot of water imagery and it's very beautiful. Well, so one of the images is this idea of entering the stream. And I love this image. And the idea is when you enter the stream of the Dharma, the idea is when you think about if there's a river, like I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and it's a big bluff right overlooking the Mississippi River. So I've been and looked at the Mississippi River many times, and it's a big river. This thing is powerful. And it might be even, I don't know, a mile across or something. It's big. And just the power of this water. Well, what happens if you paddle out into the middle of that? What's going to happen to you? Really only one thing. You're going to end up in the Gulf of Mexico. I don't think anything else is possible because of the power of the momentum there, right? And it's that idea in entering the stream that when we've immersed ourselves more and more, because what is it that we're doing? We are, to the best we can, when we have access, we're doing practices and we're inclining our mind to loosen the grip of what we'd call unwholesome conditioned patterns. And we are strengthening wholesome conditioned patterns. So the only thing that's possible is that the unwholesome, they can't help but loosen. And the wholesome cannot help but strengthen. There's really no other possibility. And we can say, man, my wounded psychology has been hanging on for years. When's it going to let go? But here's a question for you to contemplate. See if you can find anything in your life. I mentioned something when I was younger, one example, when I used to struggle around a lot of self-esteem, that when I look back on it, if I'm not, I don't notice, I'm just me now, right? And I have all my ups and downs, but if I look back, I can say, wow, compared to then, over all these years, it's gotten better. That's real fruit and change and transformation. You've got to take the long-term view. You can't look in one day or 1 week, or you got to take it, if you're going to judge it, hopefully discernment, not judging, you got to take it in 5 or 10-year increments. And so look back and see, is there anything in your life that used to be an area that was really a lot of suffering, where you can say even a little bit, it's like, um, I think it's a little better around this one thing. And by the way, if any of you, when I offer that exercise, what goes in your mind is, no, nothing. Even if I don't know you, I don't believe it. And please email me. We'll set up a time to talk, because it's not hard to help people find, even if you don't know them. So I know for a fact that if you stick around long enough, something in your life has gotten better. That's a real change that happens. So this is what happens in our Dharma practice, right? We cannot but help but move in a wholesome direction, because that's where we're applying ourselves. Yeah, we fall into the unwholesome sometime too. Okay, that can happen. It's like being in that stream of Dharma, right? It's only going one way, to the Gulf of Mexico, the river of Mississippi. The Dharma is only leading to one place, and that's more and more happiness and freedom, liberation. There's nothing else that's possible. And really, if you spend time reflecting on that, see if that can help gladden your mind. It's not egotistical. It's really to know that you are, and now some of us may be just standing at the stream, kind of looking out, checking it out. Some of us may be dipping our little toe in, say, well, okay, maybe stay up to our ankles, up to our knees. Some of us may have dived into the stream and paddled in our canoe out to the middle of the river. We're all in different relationships, but we're all in this process of finding our relationship with Dharma and letting it come more and more alive in us. And it cannot help but go towards more happiness, more peace, more freedom, and more liberation. And so I hope you will keep that in mind when you need that to support you, especially if you get down on yourself, right? Because the last thing I'll say is, it's just another way of expressing what I've been saying. It's so easy to judge ourselves by how good or bad, well or poorly, we think we're doing it, whatever it is. How good or bad you're showing up is just the conditioned patterns of your mind. That's what you're working on. What's more fundamentally true is your sincere intentions. And we've been talking about that a fair amount, so I won't go all through that again here. Your intentions to want to, as I sum it up, be a light in the world, live in a way that contributes to less and less suffering for yourself, for others, and it contributes to more and more happiness and well-being, again, for others and yourself. So that's more fundamentally true. And feel for yourself the truth of that. And I believe you'll find that even when it seems like, it's sort of like when you're because what happens with the Mississippi River, if you actually fly up in a plane, I have been over it in a plane before, there've been all these earthquakes over millennia and however many years, and sometimes the river's going south, but then it actually takes a turn and it's heading north until it goes around another bend and snakes around and goes back south again. Eventually, it all gets south to the Gulf of Mexico. If you're going down the river and you've got a compass and you're going, yep, I'm going south, and all of a sudden you don't realize you went around a bend and you go, wait a minute, I'm not going south at all. I'm going north. I'm going the wrong way. But then you'll see it, if you have the big view, you'll see we have these ups and downs, these back and forth, and it opens up and you do get there. It's the same thing in our life. We think, yep, I'm a Dharma practitioner. And then we go through a phase in life where it feels darker somehow or challenging, whatever. And we're going, it's all falling apart. What's going wrong? My Dharma practice is falling apart. I can't do this, whatever it is. But if you have the big view, we know that we do go through these things and we need to deal with them and get support and get help, get perspective and whatever we need to do to help us. But that in the big picture, these things, these phases work out because in this stream of Dharma, it's not just happy feel-good talk. It's literally true. It can only head to one way, which is towards greater liberation. So thank you for your kind attention. Let's sit quietly for just 2 or 3 breaths. I went a couple of minutes over, and then we'll ring a bell to end.